Welcome back, Rebels.
I've been thinking about pro wrestling.
Oh, I feel like this is something you probably always think about. Is there anything specific you've been thinking about pro wrestling?
Yeah, I do always think about pro wrestling, and I know about 50 million people have just clicked off the podcast as soon as I said that. But bear with me. I was thinking about how pro wrestling is so weird. Mm-hmm. You're dressed in spandex, you're throwing each other around, but not hurting each other, but trying to make it look like you are hurting each other. And I was thinking about. I was just thinking about pro wrestling as I do, like having fun in my brain. And I was just thinking, like, these people that do this for, like, it is a crazy career. Like, obviously our career is pretty crazy, but like compare it to that, and that is a pretty bizarre thing. And it just made me think about people's life paths and how to 90% of people listening to this podcast, like, they would have no interest in anything to do with pro wrestling, people in spandex wrestling with each other. But to the people that are involved with that, it is like it's their everything. And to become a really, really good pro wrestler and to become like well respected and have 5-star matches and be the top of your field, it's like that is everything to the people that are within that. And it just really made me think about the path of your life and those decisions that you make and the sort of quest for greatness in whatever field and just how it's just crazy. It just got me thinking.
I suppose wrestling's a really weird one, isn't it? Because it's like young kids will sit and watch wrestling on TV and they'll be like, these people are famous, they're earning loads of money, they're doing what they want for a living, I want to do that too. So is that going to make me also want to dress up in spandex, start fighting each other, pretending like practicing moves where we don't actually hurt each other? But I suppose like if that wasn't on TV, then you wouldn't think, oh, actually that's a career path that I could actually go down.
I look at these wrestlers and I think it's just such an interesting analogy because I compare them to someone who wants to be a jewelry maker or a singer or a stand-up comic or a public speaker or whatever the career is. And it's exactly the same. And it's just so funny to look at what is a really weird profession and just realize that everything that's going on in that is exactly the same. Because what you're talking about is the glitz and the glamour of the TV product where like a small percentage of people make it to. But the sort of grim reality of it is the traveling the country for like 365 days a year, wrestling in school gyms in front of 10 people while you learn your craft and while you become truly great at doing it.
That is the same route that so many industries have. Like so many places like will have this pinnacle of this is exactly where I want to be, but you don't really look at all of the hard work that goes into it. You don't see all of that training that those wrestlers are putting in every week. Like, it's funny because it's like, for me, I remember like when we first started talking about wrestling and I was like, this is something that I watched as a kid. And I was kind of like, it's all just stupid. Like, it's all just basically like EastEnders in a ring. But then you kind of start to explain to me actually how much hard work goes into it, how much those people train, how much like actual effort goes into it to make it look the way it does. And then suddenly I feel like as soon as you understand that, then you start to appreciate it more for it actually being a sport rather than it being just like this theatre. And I think that is just a perfect example of like a creative career. It's like people look at the people who are smashing it in kind of like on YouTube, in the video space and all these different like creative endeavours, and they're not looking at, they don't understand that behind the scenes there is loads of hard work and it isn't just all that glitz and glamour.
And I think another part that comes in that is absolutely crucial is the self-belief. And when I look at the people that have made it in that profession, it's like the only ones that have made it, when you hear them interviewed, it's like they just have this burning desire and this absolute self-belief that they were going to be successful, that they were going to make it. And that is so important. And I think that becoming the person that you want to be, no matter what your career, it happens through these incremental changes, but everything is founded on that self-belief that you will make this a success.
Yeah, I suppose it's the same with all sports people. Like, they just have in their mind that I'm going to be the best at this, I'm going to win. I'm like, it's having that mindset from the start. Because I feel like even if you're not physically as good as someone else, if you've got a stronger mindset, there's a good chance you're going to persevere and actually make it all the way through. Because I can guarantee that the best, fastest runners in the world aren't the kind of biologically the fastest, bestest people in the world. It's just the people.
Unless you're like a Usain Bolt, who obviously is like,
Yeah, but there might be someone on earth who's got a better physical attributes to be a faster runner, but they just aren't interested or don't have that mindset or the grit to put through all the training to get there. Because it's like Usain Bolt he's like, if you're at the top of the game, if you're like an Olympian, you've got both of them. You've got insane physical attributes and just insane grit and perseverance to get through that. There's going to be loads of people with insane physical attributes who don't have that grit, who are going to drop out when it gets too hard. They don't want to go to training twice a day for 7 days a week because they want to do stuff for themselves. But it is that grit that is going to get you through it. It's going to push you in that direction.
That's really interesting. And this is obviously a massive generalization, and you're an anomaly to this because you play basketball. But I feel like a lot of creative people, and I can certainly class myself in this, a lot of creative people were never into sports. So certainly for me in school, I didn't relate to the sporty jock type people.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the creative, arty skaters, that type of crowd that sort of appealed to me. And so through going down that route of all of my peers being like these type, obviously like skateboarding is athletic, and there's definitely sort of progression in that, but I feel like you're a lot more relaxed and you don't have that dog eat dog competitiveness that comes from the sporting world. And I think maybe it would be good for a lot of creatives to adapt the sports mentality when it comes to their work, even though I feel a little bit sick saying that. Like, as I say it, because it's like always my whole life, like I used to bunk games. I never went to, like I had a whole year in secondary school where I managed to skive games for the entire year and not go once. Very simply because you used to have to go and, I mean, this is the 90s, whatever. You used to have to go and write on the wall what you were going to do that term. Me and my friend just didn't write on the wall.
So when they had the register to read from, you were never there.
100%. And I got away with it. Like that fucking still blows my mind to this day that I got away with that. Anyway, but like maybe if we can bring, like certainly now in my career, I have got that sporting, like, fuck this, we're going to be successful, we've got to make this work, like, and our team, like, let's work together as a team to reach the finish line, to use a shit sport analogy.
Yeah, I think a sport analogy is such an interesting way to look at creativity, because you do have to train, and it does have to be relentless. Like, you have to get really good. You have to become an expert in your craft, and that's not going to happen if you just do it a little bit here and there. It's going to have to take dedication. It's going to have to be, I'm going to give this amount of time every day. Even if you say, oh, I'm too busy, I've not got enough. Like, if you want to do this, then you have to put in the time to do that. It's like, be a sports person, like be a creative athlete. I think that's quite a nice way to phrase it. It's like, be someone who gets up, trains every day, and make sure that they're going to win. Like, what is the Olympics of creativity? I suppose that would almost be doing it for a living. So if you can get to the stage where you're there, where you're training every single day to be able to go and kind of put yourself out there in the creative world and then go and succeed, like, that's what everyone's aiming for. That's what people want. It's to have a creative career that fulfills them, that is just, they're enjoying what they do every day, but it's only going to happen with that constant training.
I saw this great quote on Instagram the other day, which was, I'll see it when I believe it. So obviously a twist on the I'll believe it when I see it kind of turn of phrase that people use. But yeah, I'll see it when I believe it. And I think that's the start of everyone's journey, is visualize it first, then you put in the training. And as you do that, like you'll start to find your voice. It's like, I feel like I'm still finding my voice. I feel like we've been podcasting for like nearly 2 years, and like I'm finally now kind of these intros. We don't plan them. Like we literally have a 2-minute conversation when we sit down and we go, oh, what do you want to talk about today? And for this one, it was like, oh, I think we should talk about like life paths and which way you're going. You had no idea I was going to throw pro wrestling at you, and we just go. But that's because we've evolved over the last 2 years. We've practiced and we've started to find our voice and find out what it is that we're trying to get people to do, like get them to take that action, get them to achieve more, have more, be more.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's like, going back to a sport metaphor as well, it's like if you're starting, you're not going to beat Usain Bolt in a race. It's going to take a shit ton of training to get there, but it is putting that in consistently that is going to allow you to at least compete and at least be in that arena. And I think now we've started talking about the sports thing. I think there's so many different ways that we could like kind of learn from this. Even kind of the idea of a gym, somewhere that you go to train, is just by having somewhere in your house, having somewhere that you can go to, that you're dedicating time to your specific craft. Like I put up a post on LinkedIn this week where I've just kind of built myself a new desk that is away from my computer. There's basically nothing tech is allowed on it. It's just got a notepad and a pen. So if I go there, that's like just to go and be creative, just to write things down, get my thoughts out. And it's just having that little space where you can go and effectively train that I think will really, really benefit so many people. Even if that's just like a place in your house you dedicate to this craft that you're going to do. And it's easy to access. The fact that I can go over there, there's a pen and paper waiting for me ready. If you, no matter what it is you want to do creatively, make sure that that's there for you to go and do, and it's easy to access. It's not like okay, now I need to go and get all these things out of the cupboard and start, because actually if it's hard, then you're probably not going to actually go and start doing it because it's a bit of a faff. Whereas by making it as easy as possible and dedicating a certain amount of time every single day to that, it's only going to lead to good things.
So yeah, if you're listening to this, have you been to the gym this week? And I'm talking about the creative gym, the gym of creativity. Get yourself a annual membership and actually turn up to this one.
Yeah.
Actually go and put the work in. And you mentioned there like the other star athletes, like those would be the people in your field that you're looking at, and it seems so far away, and it seems so, and it seems like almost like an impossible place to get to. I think that is so good to have that. And it's so useful because, again, it goes back to the I'll believe it when I see it, I'll see it when I believe it, of looking at those people. And if they are, so for example, when it comes to like pricing, for us in the beginning, it was like we had a difficult time with the confidence of charging enough for our services. However, as soon as we learned what other people were charging, it gives you the confidence of I can become that person. That's a person that charges this much. I can become that. So then it involves self-reflection of us looking at those people and going, would do our services match up with what they're offering? And if they do, then yeah, we can charge that much because that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
So take those star athletes and either put a poster on your wall and look at it every day and say that's where I'm trying to get to, or rip that poster down. Don't ever pay attention to it, but just keep in the back of your mind that's where you're headed, because I know motivation for some people is going to be different. Like, and for a lot of people, like following those star athletes is bringing them nothing but misery, because it is such a long, arduous process that's step by step, and to know that there's that many hundreds of steps ahead of you, sometimes it's easier to just focus on what the next step is. And I think this week's guest is such a perfect example of going on that journey, like choosing that path in life that she wanted to go down at the age of 16. And she was like, right, this is where I want to spend my time. This is what I want to be doing. And just went for it.
So let's get into this week's episode with Liz Miele.
Yeah, lovely Liz Miele. I'm kind of hoping that she becomes my mate.
Yeah.
I think we might be mates with her. She's so fucking cool. I really love her comedy, and I love what she's done. Like, we talk about it in this episode, but like pandemic, fucking it is like so crippling for comedians. I mean, for everyone involved in creativity, it's been really fucking hard, but like comedians, like you have to be in front of people. There's no way around it. And so instead of, like, she was talking to Comedy Central about selling her special, and like obviously such a huge career moment for her, but instead of, like, when they dropped all their budgets because of Corona, instead of like dwelling on that, she's like, fuck it, I just put it out for free on YouTube. And like it's done so well, so many people have seen it, it's brought so many more people into her bubble, and it's just the right way to be. And I guess it's kind of an abundance mindset of, let me pop this out because there'll be more opportunities, and Comedy Central were interested before, they'll be interested again when this is all over. Like, she's just got the right mindset. Yeah,
and sometimes having that abundance mindset is the best thing to do in the long run. It's because more things will come, and I think too many people do think, actually, I put all this time into this thing, this has to be the thing that's going to make me. Whereas actually, if you put that out for free or giving it to people at a reduced cost or basically getting in front of more eyes can actually be a lot more beneficial than just putting all your eggs in one basket on this one product or one thing that you've created.
Yeah, 100%. So enough of our ramble. Let's get on with Liz. Liz Miele is a stand-up comedian and writer. Liz started comedy at just 16 years old. She's appeared on TV, performed worldwide, and has built a strong, loyal online fan base, mostly by cleverly packaging short comedy clips that have gone viral.
In this episode, we talk about cats, comedy, and putting in the work.
Perfect.
Cool.
Perfect.
I'm going to leave your perfect in.
That's a cat joke.
Well done, David.
So I think people read a self-help book, they watch an inspirational speech, they read an Instagram quote, and they go, yes, I want to be that. And then it takes work.
Hi, Liz.
Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Liz, why are you writing a book about cats?
Why am I right? I like how aggressive this gets right off the bat. I don't have any knowledge of anything else. I'm not very well educated, and it's like all I got. Both my parents are veterinarians. They're my favorite. It's weird. I think in quarantine I've been pretending I'm like a wildlife photographer, and by that I mean every time I see a stray cat, I stop what I'm doing immediately, and I literally sit on the ground and I take pictures of bodega cats, and I get really into it, and it's just my favorite pastime because I have almost nothing to do. Yeah, I like them. You know what really happened is I have an old joke from I think my first or second album, I can't even remember, that just talks about cats in a shitty way, but from a loving perspective. And this publisher was looking for exactly that.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where the title comes from. Why cats are assholes. I hate cats. So it's really funny. Obviously we started talking because you reposted a picture of one of my cats that I painted in the street, and I started painting animals because they're much more forgiving than painting people. And so when I'm doing street pieces, I can do them much quicker. And I like how cats look visually, and they're really fun to paint. But I don't want to own any just because they are assholes.
Yeah, but that's also, to me, anybody that says they don't like cats just hasn't spent enough time with them or hasn't found their cat. The same way that anybody that is oh, men are the worst or women are the worst. I'm oh, you just haven't found your person yet. That's fine. But I just think it's a generalization that gets out of hand, and they're the cutest thing ever. There's some cats that I'll forever be you are the worst, but most of them, they just sleep all day. There's truly there's nothing wrong with them. They just don't listen the way dogs do.
Because I feel like growing up for me, I was always a dog person. We'd always have dogs in the house, and I was always cats are the worst because they come into my garden, they stress my dogs out, and I never really saw a point of them. And then we fostered 7 kittens at one point, and that was the most magical experience. And I was okay, now I fully love cats. But yeah, I completely agree with the fact that they all have completely different personalities. And we nicknamed, they all came to us with names. And I think half of them ended up with names that we'd given them because we're okay, well, you're a sassy little bitch, so you're now called Sassy. The first one that came out saying had shit all up at the back of it, so that became Poo Bum. And it was just all of them had their own little personalities. And I feel people are like that as well. So I feel if you don't like cats, then you probably don't like people too.
Well, also, I think it's weirdly enough, I think it's kind of how you're raised. I wasn't raised in the most loving environment. So I think there's 2 ways that you either need a lot of attention. So a dog can give you that. A dog can be you're my person. I'll follow you wherever you go. But I wasn't really raised like that. And I also think I really much enjoy my independence. So even with my boyfriend, I'm on the couch reading, he's in the other room watching something, and I don't think this guy doesn't love me. He's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. And then at some point, my boyfriend would literally come on the couch and just sit next to me, and I'm oh, we're bonding. And that's almost how I feel like a cat is, where you're oh, we'll ignore each other for 15 hours, and then at one point you'll be I'm ready to snuggles, and I'll be okay, cool. So I think it's also a little bit how you accept and receive love, and if you need constant validation, or if you're okay with 2 people or two animals coexisting and then coming together when you want to come together.
If I'm doing some like real deep soul searching, then I think my hatred of cats is it comes down to my association of cats with a certain ex. So if I'm if I'm actually truly honest with myself, like there have been cat encounters when I've been like, yeah, you're not too bad, and I think because I ignore them, because I've always had this chip on my shoulder of like, it's a fucking cat. Because you ignore them and you don't want attention from them, they beeline straight towards you. So wherever I am, like the cat finds me, and I am kind of low key like, yeah, it's pretty cool. The cat's like really digging me.
Yeah, I'm like that. Like my girlfriend really wants the attention of the cats, and I'm a bit like, I'm fine to have them around, but I'm not that hyped. And they'll all flood towards me and love a stroke from me, but like just completely ignore her.
My whole thing is that like if anybody doesn't like them, they either haven't gotten to know a cat, or like you said, they have some kind of bad association, and that'd be like that's truly the comparison of I don't like women because you had one girlfriend that hurt you in high school, and you're just like, cool, bro, I don't know how to help you. We're not all the same.
Wow, we're off to a hot start, but I'm not going to go down the hating women route. That ex only made me hate cats, not the entire gender. But so Liz, you started comedy at 16 years old. Firstly, how did you get away with that? How were you allowed to perform in places?
So I don't know if it works differently in England. In the US, for the most part, if your club serves food, you're allowed to have people that are under 21, since our drinking age is 21. I did get kicked out of a lot of places. I mean, this hairstyle's not helping me, but I still look pretty young. So I looked very young when I was 16. I was telling somebody the other day, there was a strip club, and next to the strip club, they converted this other room into a comedy club. So you'd have strippers walking in and out of it all the time. And that was one of the earliest clubs I worked at. And I would say, if I did it like 8 times, 3 of them I got kicked out of it. They're like, what is this fucking 16-year-old? And I would try to convince them like, hey, I'm just going to do a set and then I'll leave. I was like, I don't care. They have boobs. I have boobs. I don't see the difference. Like, I don't want them. I'm not interested. But a lot of comedy is done in bars, and that I had to wait to participate in until I was 21. But for the most part, a lot of comedy clubs serve food, and most of them let you in. Some of them even let you in as young as 14, but most of them will let you in as long as they serve food, or if you have a parental figure. All places are a little different, but I've seen babies in bars out there, so I don't really trust the UK's judgment either. But yeah, it wasn't, honestly, comedy clubs just function a little bit differently than bars per se. Like they just have like different rules.
You're the third comedian that we've had on the show, and I really love it because I think comedy is such a pure version of basically what we're trying to do with this podcast, of like, if you keep doing a thing, you get better at it, and then you can do it, and that can be your thing. And I think comedy is like because there's this sort of baptism by fire. But like, how did you handle that so young? Like, I'm guessing there were nights where you go up there and you completely bomb. Like, how do you, and like, you were a shy kid, right? Like, how did you kind of overcome that, get on stage, and then go back again, even if you had a shit night?
I think it all depends on your drive. Like for me, I felt so lost as a teenager, and I was so unhappy. Like, nobody really loves like my origin story, which is like, how did you get into comedy? I was like, I was deeply depressed, and it was the only thing that made me happy. So there's a part of me that I felt lost. I didn't feel like I had any friends. I felt like I couldn't be myself. I felt like I didn't even know myself because my family upbringing was so strict that it didn't allow me to have this space to even really know what my own thoughts were, if that makes sense. And I felt so emotionally repressed that I discovered stand-up when I was like 13, 14. And it just, one of the ways that I could get my parents to be kinder or listen was to be funny. So I would always quote like SNL sketches and stuff like that. And I thought I wanted to be like a funny actress. But really, when I discovered stand-up, it was just me people had to listen to me. You get to spew your opinions, which again, I didn't even know what my opinions were, but I was like, I think I have them. And all the attention was on me, and I got to make people laugh, and I got to bring joy. Everything just kind of lined up in a way that I was so into it and I was so passionate about it that even though I didn't think I was going to be good at it, because like I said, I didn't feel like I had strong opinions. I didn't feel like I was original or funny per se. I was shy and kind of scared to interact with people. It became this like bubble of where I could get to know myself, because I always liked writing. So I was always writing like little short stories and stuff like that. But now I had this these parameters, the same way that I always say, like, I don't love Twitter. I don't love that it's only, at first it was 150 characters. Now it's 240 or 250, whatever it is. But like, I don't love those parameters, but those parameters make you be creative in a way that maybe you wouldn't have been if you just had a blank page and you could do whatever you want. And I would say the same thing with stand-up, which is, all right, you have to be funny. You have to be funny quick. The jokes have to be somewhat quick. There's this kind of format. Most people don't have props. You don't have scenery behind you. So it's this very like raw, simplistic way of expressing yourself that makes you be creative with very little extra stuff that I don't know, it made me feel like I could do something on my own, and all I had to do was just work at it. And podcasts weren't a thing when I started, but there was a couple of like how-to comedy books and a couple of like comedians being interviewed on like NPR, like our national public radio, that I just kind of learned very quickly that nobody's good at it when they first start, and that they often say it takes 10 years for you to find your voice. So it made me feel better that if I don't know what my voice is now at 16, that doesn't mean I might not know what my voice is when I'm 26. And I don't know, I did my first show, and it was a bringer show. I don't know if you guys ever had this, but it's just a thing that a lot of clubs would do, which is if you brought 5 guests, like people that pay to cover, you could get 5 minutes of stage time. And it was, I got laughs, and like I have the tape. I mean, it's almost 20 years old. I have this VHS tape somebody turned into an MP4 for me, and I think I watched it like 8 years ago, and I couldn't get through it. It was quite painful, but like people did laugh at certain parts, and it wasn't like I murdered or anything, but like in my mind, I set the parameters of success so low because of everything that I read, that the fact that I got 1 or 2 laughs made me feel like I wasn't bad at this. And I understood that it took work to get better. And I think that's the biggest thing. Cause like, I'll be honest, I think I'm really drawn to art. Like I love art. Like can't really see my room, but like a bunch of these paintings were done by like friends and people like that sell art on the street and stuff. Like I'm very much obsessed with drawings and art and like all this stuff. I love street art clearly. And I think a lot of it comes from, that was my first love. Like I really wanted to draw when I was really young, like probably like 6, 7, 8 years old. And I remember seeing a cartoon and waiting for my parents to finish work. So I'm like in the lobby of their work and I was trying to draw. And I was so frustrated that this dinosaur that I had in my head, when I went to go put it on the paper, it looked nothing like it. And in my mind as a 6, 7-year-old, I was like, oh, I'm not good at it. But then when I discovered stand-up at 13, 14, I was old enough to know and mature enough to know that it took time, and skills were built with repetitive discipline and work, that I kind of wish if I discovered art later, it would have been something I would have actively worked at and didn't think it was an innate skill. So I think in a lot of ways, it was a combination of being sad and having nothing else that I enjoyed, but also being mature enough to know that it took work, and I was willing to be bad at it for a while, and that didn't scare me, which I most of my friends are about 10 years older than me, and they started in their mid to late 20s or early 30s, and that's a big sacrifice. You're supposed to have a job and a family and security and money, and bombing in front of your friends is embarrassing, and there's so much more that was on the line for them that wasn't on the line for me. And I feel very blessed because I do get embarrassed. There's things now that I'm like, I can't believe I did that, because I don't feel the same way. Those risks are a lot scarier now at 35 than they would have ever been at 16. And that's where like I have like a mixed blessing of doing it before I realized how scary this is.
So when they say it takes 10 years to find your voice, do you agree with that statement? Or would you kind of say it takes longer or shorter? Like, how did it work for you?
It's funny. I think that statement needs to be broken down a little bit. Like, in some ways, your voice can be a combination of just your confidence, what you want to talk about, how you want to talk about it, your style of comedy, what you're willing to touch and not touch, what types of reactions you're trying to get from people. I feel like I very early on had a distinct style that has morphed because I was very deadpan when I started because as you can see, like me talking naturally, I trip on my word. I'm dyslexic, so I can't find words very easily. Like to me, if I was saying this thing and I had to write it down and polish it, it would come out so smooth and I would sound so smart. And that's almost how my stand-up feels like. I feel like my stand-up is like me editing to be the best version of myself because I don't naturally just know the right words and how to say things. So with stand up, I keep polishing and polishing and polishing so that if I'm telling a story about a guy cutting me off in traffic, the original version is I was like, go fuck yourself. But the 6 months later version, I say something really articulate and sassy and smart. And you're just like, oh my God, I want to be here when I grow up. So there's a part of me that's like, I always had, weirdly enough, very early on, even if I didn't consciously know who I was there from an early start. How I talked about things, I was always really dark. I always liked pushing the envelope a little bit, but my ability to push myself to where I am now in comedy, where I have an idea and I kind of keep pulling back the layers of the onion so I understand myself. The self-awareness that I have took time. Like, I don't think I would be the comic I was if I wasn't in therapy, if I hadn't had my heart broken the way I've had my heart broken, if I didn't travel the world like I have in the last 8 years. So, and some of it is because I started so young, which not a lot of people did. I kind of grew up as a human the same time I grew up as an artist and a writer. And I think it took me a lot longer than most people. And so I would say I really started to find my voice around 8 to 10 years. But I started to really polish and hone in that voice around 13 years. So a part of me feels like I've just started to have a baby amount of success in my career in the last couple of years. And I had early success. I was on TV when I was in my early 20s. I was passed out a lot of clubs and got a lot of work when I was 19 years old. I had little moments that were a little bit of a blessing and definitely probably got them a little too early in some people's mind. But if I would have popped off, if I would have been somebody that was on TV all the time or whatever, 7 years in when I was starting to get on TV more, I don't think I would have developed into the comic I was today because success would have reinforced that this was good enough and nothing would have pushed me to keep doing it. But because I was so obscure and I had to work so hard to get road work and for people to know who I was and to keep building my career, I really pushed my voice and my style and what was important to me artistically to a level that I don't think I would have pushed otherwise. So I do think people can find who they are earlier, but if you really want to hone who you are, get better at it and take it to a level that most people aren't, I honestly think it takes a long time. And I think some of the people that we revere, like I think of somebody like Bill Burr. Bill Burr wasn't a household name or even that successful until 15 years in. Was he funny 5 years in? Probably. But I think, and I'm sure, and nobody, don't get me wrong, I kind of don't want to, I don't like that I've been doing this 18 years and most people don't know who I am. But since it's already happened, I do feel like it's a blessing. I do feel like it's made me a stronger writer than the average person because I had to decide when I was good enough. As opposed to most people, the industry decided when they were good enough, and people stop pushing once they get acceptance. And I never got acceptance, if that makes sense.
I think that's so interesting. Yeah, because I think that people panic when they don't get certain opportunities and they feel they feel like, oh, I've lost out on this, and that's going to be a massive like hit to my career, like whatever the field is. But that's such an interesting way of looking at it, of like by not getting that opportunity, you have to get better. Like you have to sharpen everything, and then if you do get the opportunity, then perhaps that's going to cause you to just coast, which is like the worst thing for a creative, really, is going into autopilot.
And you see it a lot. You see comics, you see musicians, you see tons of people that their first or second albums were amazing, and then somebody said this is amazing, and you stop pushing yourself to be creatively different, or you start, when somebody goes, this is great, you go, I guess it's great, as opposed to before, you had to decide when it was done. You had to decide when it was good, and you kind of filtered your stuff off the audience. But now you have a manager or an agent, or, even sometimes a fan base that can kind of dull the sharpness of your mind, and it stops pushing you to be the creative person that was good enough for you, not good enough for others, but just good enough for you. And I think because I always had to satiate my own aspirations, that was the thing that got me to keep pushing myself, as opposed to what the industry was doing. And so I am grateful, because I like the work that I'm doing, and I'm proud of my voice, and I'm proud of how hard I worked. But I can be honest that if I had made it 10 years earlier, I might not be this version of myself.
And in what ways do you push yourself to grow? Like, do you put yourself in situations where almost like no one's going to laugh? Like, put yourself in a room where you're going to struggle and grow from that?
Absolutely. I bomb all the time. Like, I kind of joke with, when the world was somewhat more normal, I have paid gigs. So like the way the city works, and London is actually kind of similar, because I love the comedy scene in London. It's similar to New York, where there's bars that have little rooms. There's comedy clubs that have these kind of showcase shows where like 5 comics are doing 10 to 15 minutes. And then you really don't make a lot of money doing these bar shows and or weekday club shows. But then you travel, you go on the road, and that's where you make money. I'll go and do an hour in Ohio. I'll go do an hour in Leeds, and that's where I'll make more money. So during the week, if you're doing a bar show and you're not making any money, my logic was, if you're not paying me, I can take a shit on stage and it's not my problem. Nobody paid money. This is where I get to experiment. So then if you pay me a little bit of money, people have paid to cover. There's a little bit of responsibility, but it's a Tuesday. It's 11 o'clock at night. Most people, what are you doing with your lives? So a part of me is like, I'll slip in some new stuff in between. So like, no paid, I'll just go on stage and talk out of my ass. And if I bomb the whole time, I don't care. If I'm being paid a small amount of money and it's like a bullshit weekday show, I might, jokes that are kind of polished but not completely there, I'll do like baby experimentation. And then during headlining spots, I'm being paid, people got babysitters, that's my solid work. Like, that's going to be my best stuff. And I might ask them, if it's my fan base, I might be like, hey, are you okay with me trying a couple of new things? And that might be like a little moment where for 5 minutes I might test stuff. But for the most part, I'm like gonna like hit you in the face with comedy. And my feeling is that by having a place that I can experiment and not worry about how people feel about me, I'm constantly growing. But if you're always worried about being the best and always hitting people in the face and caring what other people think, you're going to be too scared to grow. So I always have to have during the week a place where I can just, I call it taking a dump on stage, where like people are like, is this good? Like, and I'm going, I don't know. I don't think it's good. And it might be almost like that first set I told you about, where like I only get 1 or 2 laughs, but I know from experience, okay, that's where we got to go. And okay, next show. And then I sit and I edit. And then the next time I do those jokes, they're slightly better. And I build from the ground up every time. And so because every couple of months, I'll have a couple of weeks of just pure bombing, I never get scared to bomb. I never get scared to experiment. I never get scared to be wrong. And I'm known in my community as a writer. I constantly have new material. One, because it's my favorite part. To me, this is the puzzle part. I have an idea. I think it's funny. Oh God, it's not funny. Maybe my idea. Okay, that part people seem, and I start skewing the idea based on intel every time I go on stage. So sometimes the idea is like, I'm writing a joke right now about Express Jeans. It's like a chain store here. So I have the idea where I'm just like, why Express Jeans are both the best genes but super annoying. And then somebody laughs at this part, but they don't laugh at the part that I think is funny. So now it just gets skewed a little bit. And now this joke that was originally about jeans is about coupons and about the stupid coupons you get from this chain store where you're just like, why is this your ploy for marketing? And now this joke is more about marketing and the stupidness of it than it is about the fact that I buy these jeans because they're specifically made for short people. So it's like, it's weird. So it's like my ideas are still my ideas, but based on what people are showing interest in, I start to connect with them in different ways. But it's about listening, and it's about listening to the audience. And also, don't get me wrong, I've had jokes where like it doesn't do well and I don't think, oh, I'm wrong. I think, oh, I didn't say it the right way so that they can connect with me. So then I might start changing the language as opposed to changing the perspective. So, I mean, I think my biggest asset is not being scared of rejection, especially because my whole career has been rejection. And I kind of tell young comics, like, you shouldn't be scared to be invisible. I mean, you can do your best work without people knowing who you are, so that when you do know your voice, when you aren't scared of taking risks, when people start to pay attention to you, your actions are no longer determined by fear. They're determined by what you want to talk about and what you want to do at your career.
I think it's so interesting because I feel like comedy and marketing are almost the exact same thing. You're basically putting something out there, seeing what the audience reacts to, and then doing more of that, and then constantly evolving on that.
It's like A/B testing, yeah.
The audience is like a focus group. I've always felt like and that's what's so funny is like the way comedy works for us is, you know, you're at this baby level, you're doing your jokes in front of live audiences for not a lot of money. And then somebody goes, we think that should be on TV. And so you've tested it for 3 to 6 months, maybe even a year. And then some executive goes, we want to see this on TV. And they go, you should change this. And this isn't working. You should do that. And you go, dude, it's tested. It's perfect. It's done. You know what I mean? Like, you're changing something that I've done all the research. I'm right. You saw it once. You have no idea what you're talking about. And it also gives you the confidence that you do it and then it doesn't work. And you go, that's not me. That's on you guys. Because this is foolproof. You might just not be my audience, or things might be weird in this room for whatever reason. But my joke isn't wrong. You guys are wrong.
And how do you deal with that? Like, how do you say to someone like, look, I know I'm right in this, if someone else happens to be paying for it?
Oh, I'm sassy. I'll definitely tell them. Like, I have no problem telling an audience like, oh, this is on you guys. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with people not liking what I do. I know I'm loud, I'm aggressive, I curse a lot, I say fucked up things. I don't always come from a perspective like my special. I have a couple of I have 2 abortion jokes. I have a miscarriage joke, and I've had people write to me like, hey, I really enjoyed your special except for the abortion jokes. And I'm fine with that. Like, I'm never going to tell somebody that if they don't like all of what I do, they're not a real fan or they don't know comedy. Everybody's allowed to have their perspective. I just don't want, if you don't like a certain topic or how I talk about something, I don't want you to throw my artistic ideas away the same way that you might have a friend that you don't agree with on X. And, you know, David already said he doesn't like cats. I didn't leave, you know, I didn't say like, fuck this podcast. You're allowed to, like, there's this weird belief that if you don't completely align with what you're watching on TV or the performance, that somehow you can't enjoy it. But like, it's the same way that I never understood why people were like, women can't be funny, when you're just like, I'm just a human. I'm just a human with similar, sometimes different experiences. If I can watch a guy talk about his dick for 10 minutes, why can't you hear about a date I went on? It's not that much different. Like, we're all sharing this experience. I just happen to have maybe different perspectives in this way, but I'm still a New Yorker. I'm still a human. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. You know what I mean? I'm an angry person. There's so many other things that you could relate to me on. Why are you honing in on just my gender? I only think that's a fraction of my perspective. So for me, if I see an audience not connecting with me, I might think, okay, what is it? Is it because I'm talking about too much stuff that's a woman's perspective? Is it because I'm cursing too much and this might be a part of the world that just isn't how they connect? Like, I did shows in the Philippines. It was going great. Like, the show was going amazing. And it was mostly people that lived in the Philippines. Sometimes when I travel overseas, it's a lot of expats. And then I did one of my abortion jokes and it bombed, like truly like complete silence. And I was like, whoa. And it just kind of hit me in the face because it was going so well. So then I was like, okay, let's recalibrate. Did more stuff did great. And then two women came up to me afterwards. They're like, oh, it's illegal here. So like, not only is it it's not just taboo, it's like legit, like people don't know about it. It's very hush hush. And I was like, oh, I should really do my research before I come here. Like that was dumb on my part, but I'm not mad at them. It's just, oh, okay. That's something I learned and now I know about it. So because I've traveled all over the world and I've had so many different experiences with audience, I can kind of recalibrate and be like, and kind of pick up on stuff. And then sometimes you just kind of go, all right, these aren't my audience and I'm just going to sit in it. And I'm not saying it's not uncomfortable or sometimes awful. But when it happens enough, it doesn't bother you. The same way that like I get hate comments on the internet all the time and I look at them and I go, all right, like I use the word cunt, like it's very harsh in the US. I don't think it's harsh for you guys. And I don't think anything of it, but I've had people that are like, oh, Jesus Christ. And then I get called one on the internet and I go, it doesn't affect me. It's just a word. I don't mean anything when I say it. They might be trying to hurt me, but they don't know anything about me. They looked at a tweet and got mad. Like, it doesn't bother me. So it becomes a little bit of a force field, which is like bombing kind of helps you not care when you don't connect with people. Not in a way where like I do want to connect with people. I always want people to have a good time. My whole job is to bring laughter and joy. But if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That it was never my intention to give people a bad night.
I mean, I've been a fan of yours, but like before we started talking, and it seems to me that your audience has like, I feel like you have a specific audience. Like you have this group that kind of are your fans and they get you and understand you. And the reason that they are your fans is because your voice, quote unquote, is different to like the people that have got the Netflix specials. I feel like you talk about different stuff and you present in a way that is kind of pretty like an alternative to the, I guess, mainstream comedy, and mainstream of comedy would be that which is presented to us by the big networks and so forth. And so I feel like the people that are with you kind of, they get you and that's what they were looking for.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I'm grateful for it because I think all artists want to be distinct, the same way that like you can look at something and be like, oh, that's a, Jason Pollock, or you know what I mean? Like they say good screenwriting, like good characters is you can cover their names and you can just read their lines and you can know that these are distinct, different people that are talking. And I would say the same thing with comedy, that even if I wasn't speaking the words, if somebody saw my joke just written out, you'd be like, oh, that sounds like Liz Miele. That's kind of how her brain works. I take great pride in that. And what I've noticed probably in the last couple of years is I have a lot of male fans that don't like female comics. And I find myself having to fight for female comics because my friends are female comics. There's brilliant female comics out there. And I am not the same way that I never liked when a guy was just like, you're different. You're not like the other girls. Go fuck yourself. What are you fucking talking about? There's almost nothing maybe I'm not like fucking talking about nail polish as a conversational piece, but like I'm not much different. I would say the same thing about female comedy. I always try to fight some of my fans who will be like, you're different. I don't usually like female comics, but you're great. And I'll be like, I appreciate that. That makes me feel good. But really what I hear is I looked at what the networks were putting out. It was the same kind of oversexed or women talking about sex, women trying to be in this male field and glomming onto what was already being done and just doing a female version of it, as opposed to I talk about what I want to talk about from the perspective I want to talk about. And sometimes it's about dating, but mostly it's about kind of everything. And it's more storytelling and it's more honest and more feelings perspective as opposed to being shocking to be shocking. So what I usually do is when I have some fans say that, I go, hey, I appreciate that, but here are some of if you like me, there's so many other female comics you would like that do what I do, which is just have a strong perspective, are uniquely funny, and, we just happen to be female as opposed to our label is that we are a female comic. And so I'll show them my friend Adrienne Appalucci, who, just did a small thing on Netflix on the Degenerates, and she's extremely dark, like truly like can kind of turn people off dark. There's jokes she has that I don't like, but she is the best writer, I think, out there. She always has a unique perspective. Carmen Lynch, very similar in the sense that she's surprisingly dark sometimes, but she actually comes across as more silly. And while we're all three different perspectives, or my friend Maria Shahada, she's actually she's American, but she's based out of London, and she just tells these stories that like she takes you on a journey you never thought you would go on. And so for me, I look at some of my friends and these other female comics and I go, we're very distinctly different, but we actually all happen to be female. And then you look back and you're like, that's what guy comics are allowed to be. They're allowed to be uniquely themselves and nobody puts them into a box. And so I think for me, a lot of comedy fans go to the networks and they keep choosing the same styles over and over again, whether you're a female comic or any other comic, and they're getting bored, as opposed to all the comics that aren't completely on the forefront, haven't been chosen in any way, they made a point to uniquely be themselves. And while it might not be the same, connection because they're not on some of the bigger platforms, they stand out. And I think the internet, and I'm very grateful for social media and YouTube because that's completely how I've made my fan base. I've had a couple of TV stuff here and there, but where people have discovered me is viral videos. And it's allowed me to be the unedited version of myself so that I didn't have to change who I was to get more success. And that's where I feel really grateful. And I think that's what the audiences are picking up on, is that this is the raw version of what I thought I was getting when I watched Netflix or Comedy Central.
Is the travel thing uniquely you, or are there other comics who are like traveling as like intensely as you do?
In the US, most comics can't make a living without traveling. In the US, like you just don't get paid wherever you are very well, so that the only way you can really make money is leaving. And that's why we've been pretty crippled by the pandemic. We are very gig to gig art form. So you make your money and you build your fan base by traveling. Now, traveling overseas has become very uniquely me and a small group of people because it costs more money. And if you don't have the fan base or you don't have the connections. So think of it this way, like it took me a long time to build the TV, because TV credits are what gets you bookers to pay attention to you, a fan base, credentials in the field so that people respect you. So my credits, almost like college, now that I think about it, they don't cross over overseas. So I almost had to start over when I started going to the UK and Europe and even Australia and stuff. But I took a lot of risks because I was unhappy in the US and I felt like I was being overlooked. And they paid off in the sense that I made a bunch of connections overseas and I started to kind of build my fan base worldwide. And then also, like I said, I focused on social media and YouTube, which is also international, as opposed to a lot of my friends' earlier credits were Comedy Central, which even though there's a UK Comedy Central and there's an Asia Comedy Central, they don't have a lot of crossover. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, what I did online was universal, and then I started to make my traveling universal. And I was very fortunate that because I talk about feelings and emotions, and most of my stand-up is based in how I feel about things, as opposed to like cultural references or I don't know, situational things. It just made me easy for me to cross lines, I guess. So I do think that aspect of my career has become very unique. And I think it's definitely changed my stand-up. I talk about traveling and what that means to me and how that's affected me, because I didn't come from a traveling family. My mom came to London for the first time 2 years ago to go on a trip with me. And that's the first time she's ever left the country. And that was in her 60s. And I think my dad went to Canada once. So I don't come from a family that travels. Yeah, I've become the person in my community that, like, if anybody goes overseas, whether they're like going on vacation and they want to see if they can get spots, or they want to try to tour, or the fact that I did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival almost 4 years ago now, I'm the person that people usually go, oh, Liz did it. And I'll kind of give them information on how to kind of start either just start getting more work over there, or just they're going there for vacation anyway and they want to try to get some spots. But I'm very much, it's given me self-esteem. It's given me a whole new outlook on life. It's brought in my fan base and given me so many experiences that I'm so pro. If people don't find you funny here, go find your people. Like, honestly, that's why I started. I went to Spain for the first time because one of my college buddies was from Spain. He was an artist. He made that picture right there.
Bill Murray one. So good.
So he was an artist that I went to college with, and then he moved back home and he was having his first exhibit. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Spain. It was like my first really overseas travel. And I did a show there and I went to his exhibit and I was like, oh, okay, let me see how I can get to the UK, because I noticed very early in my career, New York is very touristy. I would have tourists come up to me from England and they would always be like, you're so funny. And I'd be like, nobody says that. Like, nobody feels that way. So I was like, maybe I was born in the wrong place. So even though it took me about 5 or 6 years to finally figure out how to get there and make money there and what have you, I knew very early on that for some reason, my sensibilities and my sense of humor did well over in England specifically. And now I can see like a lot of Scandinavia likes my humor. Glasgow is probably some of my favorite shows I've ever done. Australia, like Sydney, has become like, I did 2 weeks in Sydney and I just felt like I could be myself. I just felt so accepted. Where else? Like, there's just certain places that, like, I don't know. A part of me is like, maybe not that I was born in the wrong place, but I was just like, maybe I've made the wrong friends.
Yeah. I think that's like super powerful, because I think not everyone is born in an area where everyone just instantly fits in or things just work. And to actually go and search for those people, like, those people are probably out there. Like, no matter who you are, what you like, whatever you're into, the world is massive. And if you just actually go and search for them, they will be there eventually. It just might take a bit more effort than it takes someone else.
Yeah, and I've always said I was a punk band. Like, I've always referred to my career as a punk band. I used to pay $5 and go into these basements in like Bumblefuck, New Jersey, and see like Bigwig or like, I don't know, Anti-Flag. Like, now some of them are bigger than others, but like, I remember being like, oh, these people like this too, and feeling connected to the other people that are at the show. And then being, I'm not somebody that's like super into music. Like, I feel like even now it's like my siblings are the ones that introduce me to stuff. But I now kind of get that you discover something early and you feel like you're a part of that artist's growth. And I don't know, I can see why people are drawn to me in the sense that like they feel like they're discovering what I'm doing. It's different than what they see on TV, and they're somewhat invested in my career. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm going around the world trying to find my people. I mean, I got one there, I got 6 there, there's 20 over there, and we're just going to all come together and hopefully pay my rent. That's the goal.
Because I was a big fan of like punk and stuff. I used to love Anti-Flag, and I think it is one of those things where bands especially, you love them in the early days, and then as they get bigger and more popular, you like them less. And I imagine that's almost like if you just think about going to those gigs, if they're like Green Day is who I think is a good example. It was like, I used to love them when I was like really young. Then they had some huge like hits and got really mainstream. And then it's almost like if I went to one of their gigs now, I wouldn't be able to find my people there because it would just be a bit of everyone. And I suppose that's probably why people have those connections to, as soon as it gets too big, then it's harder to find the people who you're like within that area.
Yeah. Yeah, there is something interesting about that. Like, you come to see my gigs now, it's 150 people. It feels like you could make a friend, as opposed to you go to see Kevin Hart, it's 30,000 people, and you're like, I don't even get why that guy's here. Like, why does he also like Kevin Hart? I don't get it. No, that's interesting. I clearly everybody wants to be successful and reach more and more people, but it doesn't make me sad to find out that I'm not mainstream in a lot of ways, or I might not be mainstream, because at least I'm staying authentic to myself, if that makes sense.
And I think with the internet, it's like, you don't have to be mainstream. There's enough people who aren't the mainstream to support you as a creator.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I can make a career by being universal, because before, you know, I get emails that like I have a bunch of fans in India. I've never been to India. I just got a message from somebody from Romania. They're like, "Hey, are you ever going to come to Romania?" And I was like, "Well, you're the first fan I've heard from Romania. So if you could get like 50 other people to
tell
like
all
me."
your friends. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always like, if you can get at least 50 to 100 people to enjoy what I'm doing, I'll go to Romania. Let's do it. Like, so it's just clearly it makes it harder to find people all over the place, but like the internet and social media have made it so that you're no longer bound by just your barriers or where you live or where you can get to.
Which is refreshing because, like, using Kevin Hart as a specific example, like, I thought I was broken when I first found his comedy because I was just like, I don't think I've ever laughed at a Kevin Hart joke. I think I think the dude's fucking amazing. And when he does one of his inspirational speeches, I'm like, fuck yeah, Kevin Hart, like, I can take over the world. But his comedy, I just don't find it funny. But luckily, there's the internet, so I can go and find who I do find funny.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I remember Kevin Hart when he just had like a half-hour special on Comedy Central 20 years ago. So I like some of his earlier stuff as opposed to some of his later stuff. Also, he's just not my style, and I find it interesting. If I say Kevin Hart's not my style, you don't think, oh, you don't like black comedians. But if I say Whitney Cummings isn't my style, people are like, oh, you don't like female comedians. Like, for some reason, female comedians are a genre as opposed to other comics can just be who they are. So there's also, I think in a lot of ways, diverse comedians. So like Asian comedians, which are also not very well represented. Any kind of minority comedian other than black comics, because in comedy, black comics are seen as just their stereotype is it's like black and Jewish comics are the ones that are kind of taken over comedy, and they're known as the funniest ones. And then just general white guys, people are like, they could be funny, they maybe not be funny. And then it seems to be like Indian, any kind of minority and women and female comedians, Asian, whatever, like we're just kind of, or Latina, like we're just kind of this bottom rung where people just assume we're not good. And then you as an individual have to kind of prove yourself. And so I think when it comes to those kind of stereotypes about comedy, you have to break through a couple of extra barriers. And then all you have done is made it so you're successful as opposed to a group of people are successful. So like Kevin Hart, because he's a black comic, he can just be Kevin Hart and people are drawn to Kevin Hart, but he also helps every other black comic. But like, if I become successful, I don't help every other female comic, if that makes sense.
How strange.
It is. It's just the nature of where stereotypes lie in our, because like, I don't know what the stereotypes are for street artists or artists in general, but there's clearly these weird unspoken rules in everybody's community. And the barriers that have to keep being pushed, like, Remy Youssef has a show on Hulu. I don't know if it's something that you guys are able to have access to, but he's a Muslim comedian that has a show now. He had an HBO special, I think, last year. But like his success is huge for anybody that's a minority comic, anybody, you know, the fact that we have so many horrible stereotypes about Muslims in the US and just, you know, everything that sucks about us. So that's just not only for the world is that wonderful, but for the comedy community, that's wonderful because it lets people know that other people's voices matter. The problem is you have one Muslim comedian that's doing well and they go, we did it. We solved racism. Yeah. We now have one Muslim comedian that's on television, as opposed to there's tons of different voices from other people of color, other people of different religions. But we decide that as long as we give one a little bit of a chance, we've done our work, and we don't really level the playing field as authentically as the industry thinks. So that's what I like about the internet is anybody that can cultivate a fan base can work, and anybody that can work can reach more people, and you can rise up and make a name for yourself and have a career for yourself and eventually be on TV, not because somebody chose you, but because your fan base chose you.
Does that make it harder for you? Because as soon as your material goes online, do you then have to retire it and start writing new stuff?
Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of, honestly, everything that you see online is dead already. So most of the clips I posted, even before I put my special out, I hadn't done in years. And sometimes I put them out because something happened in the news and it referenced that, and it has a new life to itself. So
Smart.
I had a joke from probably 6 years ago about a cop on the subway. I had my feet up on the subway seat and he kicked my feet and told me to get my feet down. And 2 years ago, a girl in LA got arrested for having her feet up on the subway chair. So a fan was like, "Hey, this reminds me of your joke." And I was like, "Oh." And so I like released it and I put it out there and it did really well and it connected with people. And then I re-released it a second time because of all the stuff that's going on with cops. So in some ways, most of the stuff I put on the internet is either already kind of valid to what's going on right now, and or it's done and I just want people to have access to it. Like I released my entire first album, the video of my first album, during the pandemic, like late March, because it was like my comedy anniversary. And I was like, oh, I think we're going to be stuck inside for a while. But I was giving it away at shows. If you signed up for my mailing list, I would give you my first album for $1 just to like get rid of my merchandise and just so people could see what my earlier work was. Because when I released it, I didn't really have a fan base and I was proud of my work, but nobody was really seeing it. So now that video has almost, I think, over 600,000 views, and it's getting people to see my new special. And I probably gained like 10,000 fans just from that thing that I don't even do any of those jokes anymore. Like some of them are a little bit like, I have a joke about how Tinder is new and that's not real anymore. So there's a couple of people that are like, why is this out now? And I have to be like, oh, it's from like 2015. But to me, everything I do live for the most part is unreleased, which has made doing Zoom shows really tricky because now people around the world are seeing my live performance before it's ready to be kind of seen in any other art. Like it's the internet, but it's live. So it's just a little weird. Usually I have to go, you go to Texas, you go to Tennessee, you go to Florida, but now it's all via the internet. But I kind of keep my newer stuff to my chest. And then when I'm ready to put it out as a full hour, then the rest of the world gets to see it.
And how do those Zoom things work in terms of you seeing reactions to people? Like, can you still really read the room in a way, or?
In some ways, like sometimes people are unmuted. I do a new material show every 2 weeks called Zoom Diner, where it's just 3 comics telling jokes to each other and kind of helping them workshop it. And I keep everybody mute on that. And I mostly get the feedback from the chat.
Yeah.
And, but like I'll do Zoom shows that are almost exactly like this, and I'll have the entire audience. Sometimes I'll have the audience in gallery mode and I can see people's faces. And sometimes I make it so I can't see their faces because if you think about it, in a dark room when I'm doing stand-up, I usually can't see anybody. Maybe I can see the front row. But when I tell jokes, I'm actually looking above people's heads and I'm not really fully making eye contact most of the time. So I've been doing park shows, I've been doing Zoom shows, and it's all in daylight. And I'm just not used to all this eye contact. And you don't really realize that like when I'm doing my setup, people are kind of just listening and they look kind of dead-faced. And it's kind of distracting where you're like, do they hate me? Are they mad at me? Am I going to get murdered? And then I tell my punchline and they're released and they're laughing and blah, blah, blah. But I found it's a new way of seeing the audience and it's kind of quite distracting. And then also Zoom shows, if everybody's laughing, they're disjointed and it's not a collective group, and the laughter can actually throw off your timing.
Yeah.
So it's not the best. It's something and I'm grateful for it, but it's not the best, if I'm being honest.
It's making the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, I'm grateful for it. If this happened in 2000, I don't think we would have, it would be much harder and I would be much rustier of a performer. So I am grateful to have something, but I'm more grateful for these, like, even these park shows aren't ideal, or these rooftop shows aren't ideal, but I'm grateful for them. And we're just like slowly climbing back into some kind of normalcy.
So you put your first special out on YouTube. What was the decision-making process there?
So I tried to sell it. I mean, the goal was to sell it. And I was actually close with Comedy Central Digital. But then 2 weeks after, they were like, things aren't great here. And I don't think we can buy, like, they had a budget cut. And they like froze all budget stuff. And they're like, I don't think it's going to work out. And then 2 weeks later, they fired almost everybody. So what really happened was I was hoping to sell it to somebody bigger. And because of the pandemic and people getting fired and chaos and blah, 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 it was just bad timing in a lot of ways. I always knew it might not be sold. And I always had YouTube as a backup plan. And I feel grateful that I've been investing my energy and time into YouTube for the last 10 years. So I already had like a fan base. I've already had viral videos. So I knew, so like, I don't know how it works like for you and how you kind of make money or even build a fan base around your work, but we don't make a lot of, like, I don't make a lot of money from the internet. I don't even make a lot of money from building up my acts during the week. I make all my money from live performances on the weekends. Like truly Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Friday is where I make all my money. So the goal was to put out my special, gain a fan base. Who cares if I didn't make money from the special? These new people would pay a cover charge to come see me live, and I would make all my money back from having a fan base. And now it's like I didn't make money and I don't have any way to make money off my new fan base. Hopefully they'll still be there in a year when I start touring again, or hopefully when things start happening, hopefully they have jobs. Like I'm so invested in people getting their jobs back because I'm like, if you don't have money to come see me, in some ways this is all a waste. But to me, these jokes were done. I already filmed them. It was already on a special. I get really tired of my material really quickly, so that it takes me about anywhere from, depending on how complicated the joke is, anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months to polish a joke. So then the polished version of the joke I perform for anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, and then I'm done. Once my full hour is done, I record it, and then next I start over. So if you were to see me do an hour right now, it would be 30% stuff from my special because I haven't been able to write as fast as I normally do. And then 30% of the new stuff that I've been working on since I taped it. But the goal really, if this would have happened in our past lives, the special would have came out sometime, hopefully in like March or April. And I would be on the road and you would be seeing at least 50, if not 60% new material. And my goal is to have a new hour every year and a half, 2 years.
I think I was listening to Andrew Santino's podcast, and they were talking about what happened after 9/11 and how everyone thought like comedy was going to be completely dead because everyone was so sad. And in fact, it was the total opposite. And I would imagine that will probably be the same thing after the pandemic. Is like, we're going to need to laugh.
Yeah, we're going to have a comedy boom. It's just about when, because unfortunately, where the best comedy rooms, especially like we're not talking about famous people, is in the comedy clubs. It's dark, it's basements, it's crowded. There's, if you have a mold allergy, I feel bad for you. Like they're dank, sad places. So to me, we are the breeding ground for the worst places for the coronavirus. So we were the first to shut down. We're going to be the last to open. So when it is safe, whether it's a vaccine or whatever, when it is safe and things start opening up again, we have to worry about what clubs made it. We're mom and pop shops.
That's true.
It's not, there's a couple of chain comedy clubs in the UK. There's like the Glee comedy clubs in the US. There's like, the improvs and stuff like that, but most of them aren't chains. And even some of the chains might lose some of the locations. So we're talking about mom and pop shops that might have not been able to survive if the government doesn't help them, which a lot of them, I've talked to my UK comedy friends, and you guys have decided that comedy is an art, therefore they're not getting funding. And a lot of similarness is going on where they're supporting Broadway, but they're not supporting comedy clubs. And you're like, cool. So just because our tickets aren't $1,000, we're not seen as art. So we have to see what comedy clubs are going to survive. Then because comedy clubs are suffering, they're going to go for famous comics because they want to have higher ticket prices and they want to guarantee that they can fill the room so they can make money back. So now you have less famous people not being able to get the stage time and the rooms to work out their stuff. And then you have audience members that have lost their jobs, currently can't have jobs, have back payments for rent, that they can't spend $20 or however much money to go to a comedy club. So there's going to be a time where it's going to be rough, but once things start to get back going, however long that might be, because I do think we're headed towards, at least in the US, because we've handled this so shitty, I think we're headed towards a depression, and a really bad one. But when things do start to get better, I think there's going to be a live performance boom, because we have been locked up, because this is how people want to meet others and hang out with others. And I do think people want to laugh and be entertained and have something new, because also Hollywood is also on pause, and it takes way more money, way more effort, and way more time to put something out, as opposed to I could do a live performance tomorrow.
And I think you're a survivor as well. So like whatever happens, even if all the comedy clubs shut down, like you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think in general, our art form, very similar to, I think, street art, is a survival art form. We can do it anywhere. We'll figure, if you can go down an alley and there's going to be 3 people telling jokes, like we'll figure it out. I think we don't need much, and it's become very obvious in the fact that I'm doing these park shows where they just put a sign that says stand up in the park. There's no microphone. You know, there's a volleyball game over there. There's somebody playing the trombone over there. There's kids crying behind us, and we're doing stand up. So we're making it work even in New York with very few options. And if I'm being honest, while I make my living doing stand up, I still, to this day, do a lot of free shows, and I've always done it too. Those free shows are equally as important and keep me as sharp as the paid shows, and I've never really turned my back on always trying to get better. So this might be a time where I don't make a lot of money, which is unfortunate because I was just starting to really be financially stable. But how I'm living right now, which is so minimally and just truly paying my expenses and buying nothing. I lived like that for 10, 12 years because I wanted to do stand up, and the compromise is if I keep my expenses down, I can do stand up full time. And if I have high expenses, I have to have a part-time or a full-time job. So I've lived like this before. It's not fun. I miss sushi, but I can do it.
Yeah, that's what me and Adam have always said. Is like, we call it the beans and noodles time because that's all we could afford to eat.
Yeah.
And it's like we could go back to beans and noodles tomorrow. Like we know, like we did it for 6 years. We know we can do it.
Yeah.
It's always there.
And you understand what your sacrifice is for. So I feel more bad for people that have 3 kids and they can't go to work because they have no childcare, and their work wasn't even their passion. They were just doing it so they could feed their kids. So to me, I feel very fortunate right now that my full-time job was my passion. It might not look the same as it does post-pandemic, but it'll be there in some form. And I might be a part of the crew that helps build it back up. And that's kind of cool to think about.
And I think you're being so smart. I think like putting your special out on YouTube was like such the right idea, because like during this time you can just use that to now like build your audience, get more awareness. And the best way to do that is like if you've got an hour of content there, like put it out. That's gold. Because I think a lot of people would maybe like they'd sit on it and think like, oh well, I'm just going to wait for things to get better, whereas you're like, put it out, write some new shit so that when we go, you can go to the new stuff.
Yeah, I'm happiest when I'm current, and I feel like I'm always evolving, and so I want my stand-up to evolve with me. So like I have friends that are like, that joke from 3 years ago is your best joke. I was like, yeah, but I'm not that person anymore. Like I was really bitter when I wrote that joke, or I was really sad about a breakup when I wrote that joke, or, I was suicidal when I wrote that joke, and I don't feel that way anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't relate to that version of myself, and I'm not proud of the comedy that came out of that version of myself, but me telling it feels disingenuous. So I try, There's always going to be a delay because like I said, the first version is never as good as the polished version, and I do morph in that time. So there's times where I write a joke after a breakup and it's all like, fucking, I hate you and you should die. And by the time it's polished, I've worked through my emotions and I don't feel that way about that person anymore. But I still tell the joke because I'm proud of it. And it's the thing that helped me evolve and get over this breakup. So, but if I do it too long, and a part of me is bored of the language, it's not a surprise to me anymore. And I just get further and further away from that person. And I've experienced so many things and I've grown as a person that I always want to kind of present, at least live on stage, the most current version of myself. So, even this special, there's jokes that I wrote. It came out in May, but I wrote the jokes probably 2 or 3 years ago, and they were the earliest jokes. And my dyslexic joke in my special, it was one of the last jokes I wrote, but like I think my ringworm joke is one of the first jokes I wrote. So I'm proud of my ringworm joke, but I don't feel the same way about it because it was about a dude. Couldn't even tell you what his name is. So, it's that kind of weird disconnection that I like being fully connected to my material when I'm saying it, because I think it brings out the best performance in me.
And the show's called Self-Help Me, and you've read a lot of self-help books. What's your relationship with that?
I have a love-hate relationship with self-help books. I think they have been really important to my emotional growth, and they've empowered me in a lot of ways when I felt like nothing empowered me. But I also think they're addictive, and I think they're a Band-Aid, and I think they feel like growth, and there's a lot of blind sides with a self-help book. So if a self-help book is trying to help you understand your emotions, you have to have some awareness of your emotions, and you have to have some awareness of yourself so that a self-help book can only fix what you're aware of. And you have to be open to learning about yourself. And so if you're so walled off and closed up, you can read this book and be like, wow, that was really powerful, and do nothing. As opposed to, I think the combination of self-help books, therapy, friends that you can vent to and be open with, having experiences that take you outside of your comfort zone, all of those things can kind of push you to grow, as opposed to, I don't know, just a self-help book. To me, it's sometimes one step forward, 3 steps back, because you can learn something and unlearn it so quickly, as opposed to therapy. And if you need medication, having group therapy, having experiences that take you outside of your comfort zone, all those things can kind of push you a lot further than a book that, I don't know, it feels so like false healing. Yeah.
I feel the same way about like the really inspirational speeches on YouTube with like the roaring music and everything. And they're very good at pushing certain emotional triggers that in the moment feel so amazing, and you do truly feel like you can do anything. And then I look on YouTube and I see like this has been viewed like 3 million times, and you just think like, where are all of those 3 million people? Like clearly most people don't then follow through with their actions to actually do what the video or the book is talking about. Otherwise we'd just be surrounded by like winners constantly.
Yeah. Well, growth is painful. It's hard. It's really hard. And I'm, I have certain jokes where I talk about breakups, but I have one specific breakup 10 years ago that, it hurt me a lot. And I probably was depressed for like 2 years. I wrote some of my best material in that time, but I had to come to grips with how much I hated myself, how much I self-sabotaged myself, both in my career and my friendships and relationships, how I didn't like a lot of things my parents did, but I was mimicking them, whether I knew it or not. And I had to come to grips with, I had a lot of really bad emotional habits that were hurting me and hurting others. And even if the intent wasn't to hurt people, I was still hurting people. And that doesn't feel good when when you feel like you're going out of your way to be a good person, and the result is you're not. So I had to be aware that there was a problem. I put myself in therapy, and I remember telling my therapist like 3 years in, like, can we have a session where we don't talk about how much I suck? Like, can we have something where I don't have a revelation about how I've been hurting people? Because it was so painful to be shown a mirror. And even though, like I said, it wasn't intentional, I was hurting myself and others. And it was, the first step is awareness. Then the next step is trying to stop it. And I don't know if you've ever, like, let's say your goal is not to say a phrase. Like, if I have a habit of saying "go fuck yourself" too much. So if if I say it without even thinking, it's like truly unconscious. When you try to make it conscious, you say something. My initial thought is, "Go fuck yourself," and then I go, "Fuck the whole," and you're just mad at yourself all day. So then the next thing is like, "Okay, I'm gonna try," and so maybe you get to go fuck, and eventually it could take months, it could take years, but eventually I don't feel like a lot of my bad habits are gone. If anything, I feel them. I don't say them, and then I process them on my own, as opposed to I was making them other people's problems. And I hope someday I get to a point where I don't have to hit all of those emotions to go through something. But it was work, and it's still work, and I still disappoint myself, and I still unintentionally hurt people, and I still have bad habits, but I try to constantly be aware of them and reframe them and fix them. So I think people read a self-help book, they watch an inspirational speech, they read an Instagram quote, and they go, yes, I want to be that. And then it takes work. And I think that's actually a lot of being an artist is like, where people are like, that's dope, I want to do that, that's so cool. And then they find out how much unfun work is involved, and they go, nah,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I think if you've done it in another area of your life, if you are an artist or whatever your craft may be, as soon as you've done it that one time, you then realize that you can apply it in other areas of your life, because you're like, I've got the grit to be able to push through something when it's hard or boring or whatever it is. So it's like, whatever, when you do have that one thing that you've become like masterful at, you then know what it takes to actually do it for other things, and then everything can branch out from there.
Yeah, you kind of, you're not scared. First of all, you see that the work pays off. You see how much work goes into it. And it's stopped me from getting invested in stuff that I probably would have not done, because I now understand how much work goes into each endeavor, that I go, okay, I'm passionate enough about this that I'm going to do the work, and I'm not as passionate, so I'm going to walk away. And that's actually what's taught me about friendship and dating, where I go, no, that's going to be a lot of work and I don't want to do it. I'm just going to walk away. Like it's not fair to either of us to half-ass this when we know that's going to be a lot of work.
100%. So what advice would you give to people who want to do what they love for their job, pandemics aside?
Yeah. Honestly, it's, to me, the best thing you can do is be a fan first. I think watching as much stand-up as I did, and I say watch all of it. Watch the shitty comedy, watch the good comedy, watch the stuff that you're not really sure about, because you're cultivating your taste. And by understanding what you don't like, you'll be surprised how many things where you go, I don't like the way that person tells jokes. I think it's really like low hanging fruit garbage comedy. And then you start writing and you're like, oh, I write this shit. I don't want to do this. And you can kind of have an awareness of how easy it is to go down that path. So I think first becoming a fan and taking in a diverse amount of your craft, good and bad, in your taste, makes you understand what your goals are and what your aesthetic is and what kind of reaction you hope to get from people. And then from there, it's just about doing it. Like I always tell young comics, it's about having like this, a part of your brain that stops you as you're thinking stuff. So, most people think comedy is like, well, what's funny about this? I don't really ask myself what's funny about stuff. I usually ask myself what's interesting about it, or why am I stuck on it? It's usually sticky thoughts. Why am I so angry about this thing that most people wouldn't be angry about? Why am I so confused by this concept, yet everybody else seems to get it? Why am I so upset that this person did this thing that I can't stop thinking about it? Why am I so excited that I can't even focus? I just have to tell So I take these huge emotions and I'll just write them down, even if I have no pathway to get out of them. I just go, this woman at CVS asked to cut in line, and then started telling me about her dead friend's mother. And I am mad. Why? And I remember it was happening, my CVS joke in my special. It was happening. And I was so pissed off. And then I was laughing at myself for being pissed off. And while she was getting checked out, I started writing the notes for that joke, because I was aware that I was delusionally angry about a 10-second interaction that I should not have been angry about. So for me, I think the best thing you can do, at least specifically as a young comic, is you just start having an awareness of your thoughts, and without judging them, you write them down. So stop being like, it has to be perfect when it goes down. This is my thought, write it down. Why do we love Jesus? Write it down. Why do cats knock things off shelves? Write it down. You don't have to have unique punchlines or full thoughts yet. It's just about getting everything on paper, and then the next step is fleshing it out and starting to understand yourself. But I think the best step the first two best steps is becoming a fan, and then not bullying yourself and not editing yourself, and just getting to know yourself in a way that most people might not know. Because if you're talking to a friend, unless they're your best friend, like my friends make fun of me all the time. I'll just say something and I'll be like, that tree is beautiful. And they're like, you're so special needs sometimes. And I was like, what? I thought it was beautiful and the world should know about it. But like, think about how if you're in an office or you're around people you don't really know, you self-censor yourself. You don't say all your thoughts because you don't want to be judged or you don't want to upset people or you're not sure how people are going to react to it. At the very least, stop censoring yourself and put it on paper and start from there.
Boom. Liz, where can people find you online?
Everything is at Liz Miele. I always tell people probably Instagram and YouTube is Instagram is mostly cat pictures and YouTube is videos of my stand-up. So maybe not Instagram if that's not your thing, but yeah, that's the best places to find me. And then, I have a podcast that I started during the pandemic called Two Non-Doctors that I started with my friend Maria Shahada, who I mentioned earlier. And we just talk about medical stuff with little to no accuracy in a funny way.
Amazing. Well, Liz Miele, go fuck yourself, and we'll see you soon.